Her well ahead of Vice President Biden and Sarah Palin as the most qualified to be president. And now we're getting to see a side of her that didn't come out on the campaign trail, talking about her favorite television show and a so-called crush. Vogue contributing editor Jonathan Van Meter traveled all the way to Africa to get the rare, unpoliticized look at the Secretary of State. His feature is in December's issue, and he joins us this morning. Good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Good. So you spent about 3 weeks with her, a couple of weeks in Africa, a week at the UN General Assembly, sat down with her a couple of times. What most surprised you about her?
I think what most surprised me was that she was more accessible and more pleasant and friendly and easy to talk to than I expected. I think that as a journalist, I've heard so many stories about how difficult she is to interview, and I know, maybe she has relaxed now that she's no longer in electoral politics. I found her sort of unguarded at moments and just pleasant, cheerful. She was always sort of in a good mood.
So that very scripted person that we saw on the campaign trail loosens up a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of. I got to see her like a day. One morning in Africa, she'd gone for a swim in the ocean, and she had her hair was wet, and she came to meet me for breakfast for an interview, and she just looked like a woman that had gone for a swim in the ocean, and she was just incredibly relaxed and pleasant.
We mentioned the numbers about who's most qualified to be president right at the beginning here. Let's take a look at those numbers a little more closely. When asked who is most qualified to be president next to Joe Biden and Sarah Palin, 67%. A little more than two-thirds said Hillary Clinton, 50% for Biden, 28% for Sarah Palin. What do you think is driving those numbers?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. One, I think the people in the United States are finally figuring out what the people in the state of New York figured out a long time ago when she became senator, which is that once elected to office or given a job to do, she's indefatigable. She works really hard for her constituency. She's not nearly as partisan as I think people think she is. And the other thing is that she's no longer half of the country is no longer offended by every word that comes out of her mouth because she's not running a brutal campaign. And I also think that people are seeing that she's really dedicated to the president. She's working for her country. She's going around problem solving and doing damage control all over the world, and I think people are sort of impressed by it.
There are questions at the same time that have been raised as to whether or not her skills are adequately being put to use. And you talk about an interview that you witnessed in which she was talking about Afghanistan, the potential troop surge. You say, quote, Clinton is so clear-headed on the subject, so eloquent that it raises the question, why hasn't Hillary Clinton been more out in front on the most troubling foreign policy issues of the day? Why do you think she hasn't?
Well, I think the first year in office, according to her and her staff, it's that she basically spent the first year traveling to countries and winning back the love of other people. Another reason is that she immediately appointed several envoys so that they didn't have to go through a long...
And then she broke her elbow, which
and
later
then she broke her elbow. Yeah. And I think what's happened is that she's finally just turned the corner and is stepping out now, as evidenced by so much of the press that she's getting and this interview itself.
One of the things that you write about that impressed you was you said the way that she plays with others, particularly older Republican men, really alluding to Bob Gates, the Secretary of Defense.
Right. Well, remember during the Senate, when she was a senator, when she first got to the Senate, everybody was so impressed. All of the Republican senators were so impressed with her. And I think that same feeling has returned again, which is that, Bob Gates seemed really enamored of her when they were together on stage during that thing at George Washington University. And I get the feeling, and when she talked about him, she said, he's one of, she just sort of gushed about him when she talked about him to me and said, he wrote one of the best books ever written about Washington. And
he has respect for her position as well.
Yeah, he does. And he talked about the fact that, she's the, the lead spokesman for foreign policy in America. And once you get over that, everything falls into place.
Yeah. You said that she was stunned when the president asked her to be Secretary of State. You quote her as saying, quote, I did not think it was the right thing to do. I didn't want to do it. I just really had a lot of doubts. We haven't heard her be that frank about this in the past. She's always said, oh, yes, well, I considered it and, took the job. She did have a lot of doubts, according to your article.
She really did. And according to her staff, she, a lot of it had to do with the fact that she was still sort of battle-worn from the election. And I think a lot of people wanted her to remain sort of the representative of them as an elected politician. She was looking forward to going back to the Senate. She had an extraordinary amount of debt that had to be extinguished, that if she became Secretary of State, she wouldn't be able to use herself, her greatest asset, to extinguish that debt. So, and then I think also she just had never considered it and couldn't wrap her mind around the idea. And then, what she told me was that a friend called her and said, what if you had won? and Barack Obama, I mean, what if you had won and you had asked him to be Secretary of State and he said no to you? How do you say no? And she said that's kind of what did it for her. That's what changed her mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's a job that's difficult to say no to.
Yeah.
A lot of people might be interested as to what the relationship is between her and her husband these days.
You know,
as he laughs.
She told me that when they see each other, which is very rarely, that they watch a lot of old movies together at the house in Westchester.
When you say rarely, how rare is rare?
Well, you know, I saw them together once at the Global Clinton Initiative when she was giving a speech there, and he got up on stage to introduce her. She was the big speaker that moment, and he said, you know, I want to thank everybody here for being the person that brought me. You know, I haven't seen her for a week, and thanks to you people, I get to see her. It sounds like they don't. I mean, she travels for 12, 13 days at a time, kind of constantly. So I don't think they see each other very often.
And quickly, we mentioned this.